Good evening. Welcome to the Irish NFL show. Recovery after the Christmas period. Certainly a lot to get through tonight on the back of the week 16, the crazy weekend that was over the Christmas period. Colin, you're very welcome to the show.
Yeah, certainly an interesting weekend. I think some of the games went maybe ways we didn't expect, or certainly played out a little bit differently. And obviously, some interesting news involving my own team over the weekend after we shipped 51 points to the Rams.
Yeah, certainly was a penny for your thoughts watching that game on Christmas night. Before we get into that news, and which is that Hackett has lost his job as the Broncos head coach, and then we get through the games and talk about all the playoff permutations and scenarios that are ahead of us this weekend. As always, the Irish NFL show is presented by Cassidy Travel. They are already considering next season. What an exciting season we've had. We haven't even got to the playoffs, but they're already planning for next season. You can pre-register your interest for a game, a trip of your choice to the States to watch a game next season. That information will be, as has been over the course of the last week, available via social media platforms and as well in the bio for each podcast. Should check that out. Okay, Colin, let's get into it. The Broncos inevitably made that decision yesterday evening. I think it dropped about 5 o'clock Irish time, which was, I was thinking, very early in the morning, 9 o'clock-ish Mountain Time, which came as no surprise, bearing in mind what we saw from them on Christmas night in a game which many thought they would go in and win with on the back of a really strong defensive performance. But in fact, that wasn't the case. They were 17-0 down early after a number of interceptions from Russell Wilson, and unfortunately, it's come to pass that, as we said on our message yesterday, the Broncos have decided to have their own Black Monday, and he's been relieved of his duties. It probably doesn't come as a surprise. Your thoughts yesterday as the news broke.
Yeah, look, I mean, the fact that it was 51, it could have been 71. I mean, Russ basically could have been picked off in that very first throw, and it was a shambles. But I think the press conference today told a lot, because they said that it wasn't in relation to what happened, but then they also talked about the embarrassment, and they talked about the off-field stuff. So you saw on Sunday in terms of Dalton Reisner, who is the Broncos' Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, getting into an argument with the backup QB that was over the fact that, and people have pointed out, and there have been videos, that none of the O-line guys have been going to help Russell Wilson up off of the turf when he's been sacked. That is probably telling in and of its own right. And then you saw Randy Gregory be pulled from the game before he could be ejected, and then get into a fight at the end. So I think, it was clear at that point, the train had come off the tracks. Very interesting press conference today. The new head coach will report to the owner rather than the GM. George Payton, it sounds like, has been sidelined quite a bit. I think they're trying to ensure that the new head coach will be very much who the owners want. And I think what you're looking at there is that if things, depending on how it goes with Russell Wilson, whether he's back, whatever happens, that the new head coach, even if they move on from George Payton, will be their guy. I did earlier on talk in depth with Zach Seegers after that press conference happened, because it was quite telling. There were things that were said that were kind of what you expect, the cliches, accountability and moving forward and all that sort of stuff. But there were some nuggets in there, and they gave some things away. And the way in which Penner, I suppose, took control, and the way in which at times he passed questions off to George Payton was quite telling. So there is a podcast up on all our podcast networks, wherever you listen to your podcast, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get them, in depth with Zach Seegers, talking all about the fallout, the Hackett sacking, what might happen next, and also in relation to Russell Wilson, because a lot of debate and discussion now about Russ and when you can move on from him, and what a new head coach might look to do. So, yeah, lots happened in Broncos country over the weekend.
Yeah, very good podcast. In fairness, Colin, I took time out this evening to listen to it, and a lot covered in that hour, and that just short of an hour. it makes for a really good listen. Even if you're not a Broncos fan, it's interesting to hear the thought process. Look, the most intriguing piece for me today, and you've rightly called on it, is the fact that they've both been taking responsibility away from Peyton. And I asked the question now, and maybe it's something you will cover in due course as further down the line. Will he be the GM come the next season? Is that something that's potentially we don't want to literally unfold everything immediately, but the fact that he's already been removed outside the process is intriguing one. Yeah, look, it's a difficult week. I think that for Broncos fans, it's the case. Get the season over with. It doesn't really end any better with the Chiefs and Chargers to come, albeit the Chargers are in the playoffs. So interesting off season ahead for the Broncos, as it always seems to be these days. It's never short of a story. And we will get into the games now, and we'll start with the Giants. We'll start with the Giants and the Vikings. And whilst the Giants lost this game, they still were a winner in a way, because everybody else who was in the background looking to make hay on the Giants' loss didn't win at the weekend. We'll get into the other games, but everyone, with the exception of the Packers, who all of a sudden have put themselves back in the running. The Giants lost 27-24 to the Vikings. Vikings, like Michael Lombardi, has been on the show recently, and he keeps calling it out, and it's so true. They keep winning these games, and the teams are getting on the plane, going home, wondering how they haven't won. I can explain as to why how the Giants didn't win. There was in clutch situations in the game. There was a key interception when they looked like they were going in to score at least a field goal. Then obviously there's the block punt when they made a decision to punt it back late in the game, and that resulted in a Jefferson touchdown, which made it even more difficult. Albeit the Giants still rallied and went down and scored and got the 2-point conversion. And there was also a fumble in a significant drive as well, when it looked like they were about to go in and score, when Bellinger was hit out with the ball, so another fumble. But like this Vikings team, everybody's kind of down on them because they keep winning these close games and everybody feels they're in a false position. But now they're setting records. They've got 11 one-score wins this season. It's an NFL record this year. Nobody else can match that. And you saw the emotion on the sideline at the end with Kevin O'Connell. I personally felt they knew they kind of got over the line in this one. I was looking at a stat today, field goal related stats. Since 2016, there's been 15 over 60-yard field goals, and only 2 have been made. With the exception of the Giants, where the Giants have been involved in those games, there's been 3 attempts, and all 3 have been made. So we're cursed when it comes to over 60-yard field goals. That kicker, in fairness, has been criticised at times. He's had some difficult times throughout the course of his career, and once it was difficult to take the defeat on board, it was good to see him kick a significant field goal, because he's had a tough time at times. He's had a good season, but there's been instances we saw an easy field goal missed, a chip shot in London, as happened when we were over there. And for the Giants, look, the Giants are still in the position that every Giants fan would have dreamed of, which is to beat the Colts on Sunday. You don't need any of the results, and they're in the playoffs. And bearing in mind, they played a few weeks ago against the Eagles, who were the number 1 seed, and they were very, they didn't match up at all. I felt they matched up quite well against the Vikings team. Nearly got it done. And we've seen in the past where teams lose a close one in the regular season, find themselves playing them again in the playoffs, and manage to win that time round. It wouldn't be against the round's possibility the Giants could play the Vikings again, and in the playoffs, and who knows, they could turn them over. But for the Vikings, they march on. They've got a tough one this weekend against the Packers. Giants, as I said, can beat the Colts on Sunday at home in MetLife, and that will secure the 6th spot in the playoffs, 6th in the playoffs, which is a significant season, bearing in mind what was expected of them coming into this season.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you almost wonder if the Vikings have that team of destiny type feel, because they find new ways to win. It's not just the same thing. It's not that like Cousins is finding Jefferson at the end. They are at times coming up with different ways. For the Giants, the Giants are way ahead of schedule. So no matter, I think, how it plays out, of course, there would be enormous disappointment if they weren't to make it. But at the same time, they are so far ahead of schedule. And it will be interesting, I suppose, to see how the Vikings can get on against the Packers. As you mentioned there, Packers returning to form. But the Vikings be going against everything that you would expect with the Vikings. Like for the Vikings kicker to make it. Now, this has happened to the Vikings in some seasons previously. And generally, what it leads to ultimately is incredible heartbreak in the playoffs. The Ice Bowl game a few years ago, where it was so cold that the Viking horn actually broke and that missed the field goal at the very end, and so many heartbreaks over the years. But this year, yeah, they just look really, really good. And they seem to have, under O'Connell, talked about the culture change there and the fact that he makes players better, but also the ability to rebound. So when they do make mistakes, like Kirk Cousins previously had a tendency to really get in his head, and when he made a mistake, he wouldn't bounce back. He would allow it to impact on him, and that seems to have changed. So, yeah, look, the Vikings, we will see for them, how far they can go. For the Giants, it is about ensuring that they get to the dance.
It's interesting because I was reflecting on when the Eagles won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago and they played the Vikings in the championship game and they blew them out. And the Vikings had come off that Minnesota miracle against the Saints, and everybody just assumed the momentum was there. The Super Bowl was in their stadium that year, and it didn't materialise. And right now, things are tracking in a way where we could see a repeat of that championship game. Obviously, they played each other in week 2 this season, and it was a similar scenario. The Eagles put a beat down on them. We'd be interested if they come around again, how close it'd be. The Vikings, for me, yeah, it is a great storyline, but this number 2 seed is critical, in my opinion. They need to get it. Like the 49ers, we're going to come to the 49ers shortly, but the way in which they're playing at the moment, having won 8 in a row, they need to be at home for that wildcard game. They need to be home for the divisional round. If they go on the road and they end up in San Fran, divisional round, I think ultimately that's where the difficulty will come from them. They need to make sure they're playing these games at home. But look, right now, if as a Vikings fan, you couldn't be more pleased. Interesting one now, next one, Colin. We all picked the Lions. The dreaded vote of confidence that they would go in there and beat the Panthers. Bearing in mind the Panthers the week before were beaten by the Steelers and beaten badly by the Steelers because their running game that we spoke about, the three-headed monster of Hubbard, Blackspear, Foreman, didn't do anything against the Steelers. Only ran 21 yards in rushing that week. And yet last week against the Lions, the Lions seemed to revert back to what we saw earlier in the season. They put up 320 yards rushing against that Lions defense on Sunday. But not only that, they were also very good, in terms of the passing attack. Sam Darnold had a really strong game. They were well coached. I mean, even in the second half when they were up by the scores, the methodical drives, the killing of the clock, they're using the play clock right down to the very last second to eat as much time off the clock. And the Lions really had no answers for them on Sunday. There was a point late in the second half where the Lions were in the red zone and looked like maybe they were turning the game on its head, and then Goff goes and fumbles, and then resulting drive from the Panthers is a 90-yard drive and a touchdown, which essentially kind of put the game away, capped off with a field goal before halftime to go 24-7 up. Immediate stop at the start of the second half, and then the next resulting drive for the Panthers, touchdown. I mean, the game finished 37-23. There was a few garbage time scores late on for the Lions. Really kind of, for me, it doesn't do a reflection of how dominant the Panthers were. And it's a huge loss for the Lions, bearing in mind that they still have to go to Green Bay on the final weekend of the season, which probably looked like a nothing game for the Packers a few weeks ago, only for them to be back in the fold. It's heating up to a big game. But for the Panthers, like, this is where they wanted to be. The coach, everybody's talking about this coach now potentially being the permanent head coach, and they go into Tampa on Sunday with an opportunity to beat the Bucs, go top of the division with one game to go. I mean, it's been a huge, despite the defeat last week, you couldn't be more impressed with this Panthers team right now.
No, and Steve Wilkes is doing a fantastic job, and rightly, has to have forced himself into consideration, and if he doesn't get it there, I'm sure somebody else will look at him. I mean, they're on their third QB. He's his best player, traded away. Yeah, look, it was all about the ground game on both sides. The fact that the Panthers were able to run all over the Lions, and the fact that the Lions could not move the ball on the ground whatsoever. Jared Goff was the Lions' top rusher with 15 yards. tells its own story. Really, really disappointing for the Lions, because they had been playing so well. But yeah, look, again, we'll probably come to it later. The Bucks finding ways as well, but you would have to say, if you're the Panthers and you're looking at the Bucks' performance, there shouldn't be a whole lot of fear there. They should be able to go into this game and think that they are certainly capable of winning it. And who knows, wouldn't that be a story for the ages? All the people who say there's no point in changing a head coach midway through the season in the NFL because your rosters are essentially set, you can't do anything. Well, my goodness, Steve Wilkes might prove them all wrong. We shall see. Still a way to go, of course, but certainly impressive nonetheless.
I'll throw another intriguing subplot into this column. We'll pick up on this game maybe later on in the show. It wasn't the best game, bearing in mind the adverse weather conditions in Cleveland, but the Saints have won. They're now level on the same record as the Panthers. And if the Panthers were to win on Sunday, and the Saints somehow managed to win, they've got a tough game in Philadelphia, obviously, but then they play each other last weekend of the season, and that could be the game. With a three game swing, you've got all three teams potentially going into the last weekend, and the Falcons play at home to the Bucks in the last weekend. Despite the records, there's a lot of intriguing storylines to come in this division. It's not a slam dunk. Obviously, if the Bucks win this weekend, the division is over. They will rightly walk away with the division then. But like as you said, they're not playing well. They got over the line in Arizona, and we will probably pick up slightly on that game later on. But look, there's a lot to play for this weekend. It's a great win for the Panthers. We're going west now. We're going out to Santa Clara. The 49ers did what everybody expected to do, which was to beat the Commanders. I think 37-20. It seems like a bit more of a dominant score than I felt it was. The Commanders come into the game. They have the ball offensively for 35 minutes of the game to keep the score, very close. For the first half, there was very little done. It was close going into the second half. And then Brock Purdy, in fairness to him, he took over at 224 yards, 2 touchdowns again. There was a couple of interceptions in there. It wasn't as secure as he looked over the past few weeks. But again, I think the Heineke storyline and the nice storyline of him bringing the Commanders to the playoffs is starting to run its course. We saw in some of the plays how frustrated Ron Rivera was. He was very frustrated and animated about a 4th and 1 that they couldn't get over the line, which was kind of a big game changer. And then for the team that were top 10 against the run, they allowed the 49ers to go 153 yards. It's only helps Brock Purdy as well to win a game where you've got the likes of McCaffrey and Wilson able to do strong things in their own game, and that was quite disappointing. I thought the Commanders would have done a better job there, but the 49ers keep moving on, and for the Commanders, the fortunate thing for the Commanders going into this game was they knew even if they had lost, they still remained in the 7th seed. But I think the big talking point coming out of the game was the benching of Heineke and the fact that he brought back in Carson Wentz. I couldn't get the feel that Rivera just wants to play Wentz, but he feels obliged to play Heineke, and he finally snapped and made that decision to bring Wentz back in. Not sure who's going to start this week. I'd imagine, bearing in mind how the game played out, I think he will run with Wentz. They're playing at home to the Browns on Sunday in a must-win game, but it played out as we thought, but that's the storyline for me. Where do they go now? This quarterback storyline has been there from the last off-season, and it's going to remain in place no matter what the circumstances of the end of the season for the Commanders.
Yeah, look, the Commanders, it is all about the QB. You would say that the wide receivers, Dotson is a guy who had a lot of questions when he went. People were wondering, how he would transition into the league. He's been great, but the QB is the conundrum for them, and this 49ers team are just... they bully you. We've talked about that on the show before. They absolutely dominate you and they bully you. And even with QB3, they put up points. And for them, nobody is going to enjoy facing them. And if you have to go there to California, that's an issue, but they have shown over the last few years, the Sunshine Boys went up to Lambeau, and in the freezing cold, they shut down the Packers. They're capable of going anywhere, even into to Philadelphia and getting a win. Very, very impressive from Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, yeah, very another really good strong performance. You're right. No matter where they go on the road, like we've seen it before, they can find wins. If that is the NFC Championship game, it will be a really enticing one to look forward to. Next game, I don't have a lot on this one because I went with the Bears, so maybe I should leave this one to you. But the Bills maintain the number one seed in the AFC. For an large part of the game, I thought the Bears did a really good steadying job on Josh Allen. I mean, the weather probably was a factor, but Josh Allen turned the ball over a couple of times. The Bears played like we've seen recently, keeping within games, keeping within one score. But inevitably the class took over, towards the back end of the third quarter, fourth quarter, and it was a rout in the end, for them to put up 35 points in those conditions. But in fairness to the Bears, Justin Fields didn't have the greatest games compared to what we saw recently, but he still did enough. He still showed enough promise again that the Bears fans will be very confident that if they can build around them. And for the Bills, it's a crucial win. Obviously, they're going to see what comes of the Bengals. So they've got the Bengals this week, Monday Night Football. So that's obviously a key game, and the Chiefs have held on again. But I mean, where do you go with this Bills team? Because they don't have a running game. We saw it again on Sunday. Singletary has some bright spots, and Josh Allen again. They're relying on him to run. Didn't have as many yards as we've seen previously, like the week before against the Dolphins. But we all think they'll be in the Super Bowl potentially, but yet they still don't have a consistent run game. Is it gonna come back to haunt them in the end?
It could, but Josh Allen just is a man on a mission, and that's the difference, And yeah, this was a game, I suppose, in some ways, like similar to the last game, where up to halftime, it was very even, and the Bears obviously go in up, and the Bills are super frustrated, and Josh is trying to do too much, and then he manages to channel it in the second half. Ultimately, for the Bills, if they get the number one seed, they will have earned it, because they now have a road game against the Bengals, and then they have to take on the Patriots, albeit at home. But that's tough. A divisional matchup, Bill Belichick wanting to try to spoil the party. So if they do get it, they will absolutely have earned it. And yeah, they are doing it in a difficult way. The run game, I suppose, is the biggest factor, but we saw at times, last year in the playoffs, they absolutely took off. So it's about catching fire at the right time, and they are certainly capable of doing that.
One team there's two teams challenging. Bearing in mind that the Bengals are on a run as well, but obviously the Chiefs are the one that is the key focus. They played each other. I think it was week 5. The Bills won 24-10 on Sunday against the Seahawks. I was delighted to see that score. Bearing in mind the Seahawks are in the running for a wild card spot, but again, it just doesn't feel right. Like, they came out early. You got Kadarius Toney scoring a touchdown. They went down the field at ease on the Seahawks defense, and they got up early. And it looked like it was one of those games that were just going to put them to bed, plow on, like in a way, like similar to what we saw in Mile High a couple of weeks ago. And then, as the second half progressed, similar to what we've seen, they do very little with the ball offensively. Seattle moved the ball quite well up and down the field, but then key fourth down plays couldn't make the play. And the Chiefs eased their win. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes went in with a late score, rushing touchdown to kind of put the game away. I was kind of questioning whether that really was a touchdown. I know he stretched out and he hit the pylon, but I've seen them not given, but wasn't challenged, wasn't looked at in a replay. But again, they're winning, but they're not winning with any deal of, I wouldn't say comfort, but like you couldn't right now with the confidence that they will go in and beat the Bills. If the game was to come around again and they play each other, up in Buffalo with the weather and all the rest, like, they just don't seem to be doing enough right now. Look, they're winning, like, don't get me wrong, and they've got very winnable games to finish the season off. They've got, as you said, when you look at the Bills' schedule, they've got the easier running. They play the Broncos and they play a final game against the Raiders, who right now are hit and miss. So they should win out. They should be in a position to challenge the Bills for number one seed. But they're stuttering in the playoffs, in my opinion.
It's a strange one. It's tough to know, because I feel they have so much ability, and at times it's almost too easy, and they switch off because they're so dominant generally early, and teams kind of can't keep up with them, and they almost get bored and allow them to kind of come back into it. So they have a challenge, but you can't do that in the playoffs. That is the issue. Patrick Mahomes is playing unbelievably well, and he has, he absolutely enjoying himself. Like the league, one of the reasons that everyone's gone to the too high shell is the likes of Patrick Mahomes. But he has found out how to toy with that system now. For the Seahawks, it is 3 losses in a row. The Gino isn't playing well, but the line isn't helping him. The line has definitely regressed, and that is an issue. And Tyler Lockett being out, I mean, Lockett is such an important kind of player for them. The Chiefs, this is the thing though, they now take on a Broncos team who, they should absolutely dominate that game on Sunday. Will they? But it's all about the playoffs for the Chiefs and what version of them shows up. So for them, the last 2 games are get the win and ensure you've no injuries.
Just going to throw up a couple of comments, kind of reflecting on what we just said there about the Chiefs. Good point from Luke. They need to play much better if they want to be in the Super Bowl. Second half performance needs to be better. I mean, we touched on it there, and the Bills and Bengals right now are the better teams. Bearing in mind how well they're playing. Luke also had a good one around the Panthers. Good win, coach done a good job again. Similar kind of thought process. Whether he'll get the job is another one. Is another team come the end of the season. If not, someone else may pick him up with the Black Monday ahead of us after week 18. Moving on, next game. Now this is an interesting one. We're moving it back. We're jumping a day ahead of the other game. We're going to Christmas Day. Colin, we all picked the Dolphins. We all felt the Dolphins would find their way to ease the concerns of the last few weeks where they've lost 3 games in a row. And for large parts of the first half, it looked that way. Tua was showing some lovely balls to Waddle and to Hill, and they went up by 10 points, and everything seemed to be going fine. They had a strong run game. They didn't finish great with the run. They finished with 82 yards rushing. They had 62 yards in the first half. In the second half, they handed the ball off 4 times. It didn't make any sense because they were gashing the Packers in the run, and they were getting significant plays down the field. I think the turning point was just before half time. They were up by 10 points and looked like they were driving again to potentially score and really secure the game essentially just before half time. And there was a fumble, a huge play by the Packers defense. I think the Packers only took a field goal off that, but it still felt like a bit of a momentum swing. And even into the third quarter, there was a pick off by Rodgers, and it looked like the game was there. But to it on Sunday, I mean, for a team, don't get me wrong, we praised the head coach all year long, but they got away from the run game. Mostert and Wilson were doing really well. As I said, they had some good numbers in the first half, and in the second half, they only handed the ball off 4 times. Two was, I wouldn't say they were struggling, but he didn't have the same composure as what we saw even the week prior in Buffalo. He turned the ball over 3 times, and the Packers adjusted very well in the second half. Where they were getting gashed down the middle on throws in the second half, they squeezed the middle of the field, wouldn't allow Tua to go into that area, and he was then reliant on trying to go out to the perimeter. And as you called out a few weeks ago, in the game against the Chargers, when he was going out to the perimeter, he wasn't getting the ball into the right spots for the wide receivers. Similar kind of pattern. And then he got intercepted 3 times, in the last one in particular, when they got the ball back, having stopped the Packers and made it a 6-point game. Look, okay, 2 minutes 1 second to go. Potentially an opportunity to go down the field, win the game, secure their playoff spot. He throws a needless interception with Tyreek Hill wide open on the other side of the field, so it was a very off-putting play. And Tua is back in the concussion protocol. Saw a good one this morning. It's the big play or no play with Tua right now, and that's how the Dolphins are treating this offense, because they seem to have the run game. Bearing in mind how well they did the week prior against the Bills, they got away from it very quickly in this game. And the Packers right now, that's 3 games in a row, and they're on a bit of a run. The Vikings are home, the Lions are home. There is a possibility they could sneak in if the results go their way, in particular with the Commanders over the next 2 weeks.
I think though, Brian, Tua shouldn't have played the second half. Tua was concussed. Like this is insanity. Like how the NFL have pulled players from games who aren't concussed, but when players are concussed, they're allowed to play on. Like, where was the spotter? And what were the Dolphins doing? Like, sometimes you have to save players from themselves. I know Tua might want to play, But my goodness, the league has a duty of care to its participants. I mean, the Tua is on his third concussion of the season. They tried to play one off as a back spasm. Remember that? That this is bananas, and it was very evident what like that he wasn't right, and yet it just continued on. I They have to um for me, shut him down for the rest of the year. I know Dolphins fans will want to hear that. I know that will impact on them, but I don't see how a guy who has had 3 concussions in the space of 3 months, that's a brain injury, like your brain gets rattled around. That's what a concussion is. I don't see how you put him back out there again. And the league and the franchise need to protect the player from himself. And just because he says he's fine does not mean he's fine. And look, yeah, the kudos to the Packers, but Tua shouldn't have played that second half.
We're speculating, but if the Dolphins do know at halftime there's a potential concussion there, and obviously they're so focused on winning the game and getting into the playoffs, why does the head coach, maybe we flip it onto the head coach, why does he get away from what was working in the first half? I mean, we're not going to pretend we know everything that goes on in terms of calling the plays, but when you've got an effective run game, 2 players that are doing really well, your quarterback is struggling potentially with a whatever, if it is a concussion, but certainly an injury of some sort. Why not rely on what has been happening? Surely that eases the pressure on your quarterback to allow him to play not a conservative game, but like you're balancing the offense with run and pass instead of reliant on Tua. Because in the second half, I think it was like 87 of the plays which were passing plays. And LaFleur said after the game, "Oh, we knew at halftime we had this. We adjusted at halftime. We knew our guys were already reading Tua's eyes. They knew he was struggling with an injury, and obviously now we're talking about a concussion. But they knew at halftime he's not right, and if we read his eyes, we're going to get interceptions, and they get 3 interceptions in the second half. Like surely McDaniel again has to be called into question around how he calls this game."
Well, it's on him, but it's on everyone in the organization. I mean, the medical staff. I mean, I'm sure, he will say the doctors cleared him. Well, how did the doctors clear him? It's a mess. It really is, and you would have to say, as impressive as the Dolphins have been on offense at times this year, their handling of situations at times has been absolutely baffling. And I wonder how they are going to handle this situation going forward. But as I said, 3 concussions in 3 months, no, it's crazy.
Similar point. How can the spotter not catch it? You've called it. Everyone has called it as well. Everybody's called it over the course of the last few days. It's very evident. Interesting to see how the next few days play out. I certainly don't think he's going to be playing this weekend. So, 2 teams with very precarious situations if they're going to make the playoffs. These 2 teams will be in the playoffs, and they treat us to a shootout in the 9:25 window on Christmas Eve. Eagles, Cowboys, NFC East, typical game, as we obviously when these 2 play each other. High scoring affair. Cowboys coming out on the right side of this one, 40-34. The Eagles never punted once in the game, I don't believe. The Cowboys defense struggled against Gardner Minshew, but in fairness, he had a really strong game. And it kind of played out in the manner in which we said, like we felt it wouldn't be a big drop off. Obviously, there are 2 different quarterbacks, Hurts and Minshew, but he arguably is one of the better backups in the league, and he came out firing. The Cowboys, the Cowboys defense right now are going through it. I don't know how to put this defense down. Like they were so dominant earlier in the season. We were singing the praise of Lawrence and Micah Parsons, but over the course of the last few weeks, like the Texans game, the game in Jacksonville last week when they gave up over 500 yards, and again this week, the Eagles went up and down the field for them, and I felt the Eagles really should have won this game. There was significant 4-quarter plays that kind of changed the game. Like in terms of there was 2 turnovers, there was the fumble, then obviously there was the interception, which was a great interception, in fairness, by the Cowboys. That turned the game. And I would think back to a 3rd and 29 play by Dak Prescott where he finds T.Y. Hilton, where for some reason Gannon did not call I thought they would have went Tampa 2 there, essentially block up the field. Yeah, you can take yards in the middle of the field, but you're not going to get 29 yards on us. But Dak Prescott throws the bomb up. T.Y. Hilton comes down with it, and that's a game changer because at that stage the Eagles were up by 7. You would stand that third down there, you get the ball back, and the way in which the Eagles were moving the ball at that stage, you would think they would put the game away. But Dak Prescott started sluggish, struggled early, finished at 27 to 35, 347 yards, huge numbers, 3 touchdowns. But for me, that bomb was the game changer. And despite the fumbles, to me, that would have been the play that would have given the Eagles the win. And even then at the end, they still managed to go down the field 67 yards and put themselves in a position to win the game. Just couldn't get it over the line. It's a great win for the Cowboys, bearing in mind they're still with a slim chance of winning the division and potentially even getting the number 1 seed. But questions have to be asked of this defense because they're going to come up against the likes of the against the Eagles again, whatever way you look at it in the playoffs, and the 49ers and even the Vikings, who can put up huge numbers. And okay, the Vikings didn't have the best of the games the last time, but again, come playoff, that could change. So Cowboys could win, but I'd be very concerned going into the playoffs the way the defense is playing at this moment in time.
Yeah, it was a strange game, and yeah, the 3rd and 30, I think, is what this game will always be referred to, and it was just that changed. To me, the play call and the execution by the Eagles was awful, and they got completely discombobulated, and they just lost their heads for a few minutes after that, and by the time they got right, it was too late, essentially. For them, I think while there wasn't a huge drop-off, you saw the difference, and if Hurts had been in there, it could have been very different. But Lane Johnson is now out for the rest of the regular season, and we don't know what it means for the playoffs. That line is key to everything the Eagles do. It dictates everything because it allows them the opportunity to run whenever they really want to. It allows them to, and especially with Hurts there, because you're not sure, is he going to take off? Is he going to sit back and pass? But without him there, he is one of the key pieces, and that is a huge loss that I don't think can be overstated. They should have enough probably to just get over the line, but if he is missing for the playoffs, that is a significant dent in the Eagles' armor. For the Cowboys, yeah, look, they found a way to win. They needed to win, and they did. I did think again, Jerry's comments to Jerry Jones is something else. CeeDee Lamb drops a pass because of the sun, and Jerry gets asked about it today and just refuses. We know the sun is there. Yeah, Jerry, everybody knows it, and it's caused numerous issues. It has cost your team on a number of occasions, but because you wanted to look nice, you refused to do anything. It's telling to me. That is telling that an owner he claims he wants to win, but he is more concerned about the aesthetics rather than ensuring the team gets victory. I couldn't see Robert Kraft taking that approach.
Was it not that he said that it's the same sun that the Eagles had to look at as well? Yeah. Here comes the sun. That's probably on his CD player. You're right. Like it's all about the razzmatazz for Jerry. He wants everything to look great and stage him to feel nice. I mean, we have the repeated instance of punts hitting the big screen above the pitch time and time again as well, because they couldn't figure that out either. Look, yeah, interesting to see how the Cowboys play this weekend, and essentially as well as that, Eagles home to the Saints. Saints obviously have to win now, and bearing in mind there's a few injuries, not just Lane Johnson, there's a couple of other players that are carrying injuries. It'd be interesting to see if they do secure the number 1 seed, if they play anybody come the last weekend of the season when they play the Giants in Week 18. Interesting to see. Cowboys, again, it's what we spoke about a few weeks ago when Fred was engaging. They essentially know where they're going. They know they're playing the NFC South, and they're obviously locked into that 5th seed, obviously with a slim chance of getting the division. So interesting few weeks ahead to see how many players they want to play come the time when the Eagles wrap up number 1 seed. Next one, interesting one. Didn't look interesting for a long time. Looked like this was, again, another shambolic offensive performance by the Patriots in the first half. Only to see a glimmer of light in the second half after a number of picks by Joe Burrow. 22-18 Bengals win. Very confusing game, I felt. The Bengals were so dominant. They go in at half time with a nice comfortable score. They come out the second half, continuously throwing the ball. Joe Burrow threw the ball 52 times in this game. You would have thought Zach Taylor in the second half would have relied on the run game to eat up as much clock, run the ball effectively, get first downs, put this game away. But no, they continued to throw, which led to turnovers and a pick six, and brought the Patriots back into this game. And then the momentum continued to build, and now it's a feel that the Bengals kind of got away with this one because Stevenson is in the red zone. Sorry, the Patriots are in the red zone at the end, which again wasn't the greatest of performances by the Patriots offense, but they somehow managed to get themselves in a position to potentially win the game. And they go fumble it. And we spoke last week about this Bill Belichick. It's so unlike his teams to make costly mistakes at critical times. We saw the fiasco in Vegas the week prior to that, and it looked like for all the money and love in the world, Stevenson was going to, run it in or, put it on the goal line potentially for Harris to run it in, or even a Mac Jones sneak. And the Bengals defense looked gas towards the end of the game. Obviously, it was a long game for them in the second half, but there was also missed points. I mean, the Patriots missed 2 extra points in the game. The weather obviously had a factor. The Bengals missed an extra point. I mean, if the Patriots don't miss those extra points, they're in a position to win the game potentially, or at least get the game into overtime with a field goal. But having to get the touchdown, big play by the Bengals defense to get the ball out. They recover. They get away with the win. They march on towards a big game this weekend. And again, another game which the Patriots will be looking at themselves going, we're outside of the playoffs right now. We really should be in that 7th seed, if not the 6th seed. Bearing in mind how the last few weeks have gone for them. It was a tough loss in the end for a game which never looked close for a long time.
Yeah, it was an absolute ass kicking for that first half. It was they were dominant in every single aspect of it, and I just wonder, did they get complacent there and eyes turn to the Bills game because they looked a different team? And yeah, for the Patriots, the talk is all around Bill O'Brien might return and they might actually have an OC next year. And maybe if they had a proper OC this year, it could all be very different for them. We saw Mac Jones get into a little bit of trouble, and there's a fine coming his way, and a compilation now doing the rounds of some of his more underhanded plays, let's say, of his first couple of years in the league. The other talking point, I suppose, out of this one, Brian, is Collins going down injured. And as a result, Peter Schrager starting a campaign to bring Andrew Whitworth out of retirement so that he could win potentially a ring with his hometown team. He was on Schrager's podcast earlier today, and he didn't say no. So it's unlikely, but we saw Eric Weddle come off the street last year and be very impressive. Who knows? But it is a big issue to lose Collins, and just on a total freak injury. The Patriots player just got pushed into him, and they from what I saw, there are no structural damage, but they don't know how long it might be. Huge game, obviously, on Monday night, and that will tell a lot. But Joe Burrow, up to the end of the first half, Joe Burrow had been incredible over the past few weeks. And if him and Allen are on top of their games on Monday night, we are in for a treat.
They seem to have found the gem in this Irvin player. He's starting to crop up with a lot of touchdowns. One against the Browns a few weeks ago, 2 there on Sunday. They seem to have found a player. Bearing in mind they lost a tight end last in free agency to the Jets. To have him come in and have an impact, at the back end of the season. You're right about the Collins injury. I mean, it wasn't even impacting on the play either. The way he was just kind of caught up in the scrum of it all. And he's had a really strong second half of the season. Bearing in mind that for the first half of the season, the offensive line took time to come together. Bearing in mind there was 3 new players that came in during the free agency period last April. Big win, as you said, Monday Night Football. You couldn't ask for more. Week 17, Bengals and Bills. It's a fantastic game. We're going to jump into a couple of games now, just kind of a quick fire round, shall we call it. But it's one I left out, but I'll call it out now because it was last Thursday night. It seems like a long time ago, but the Jags obviously went into MetLife last Thursday night in not the greatest conditions, beat the Jets. I think it's the end of the road for Zach Wilson. Bearing in mind what we saw, it's already been confirmed that Mike White is going to be available this weekend, so obviously immediately he's starting, and Joe Flacco will back him up. Zach Wilson was removed from the game and booed throughout the course of the game from because he just couldn't do anything right. From an early stage of the game where he didn't even get a reading of a play where he got literally um, pounded by the defensive line guy, sacked immediately, which was the only score in which the Jets had in the game, which was very early on. Haven't got the fumble of Trevor Lawrence. It was a very easy win for the Jags in this one, Colin.
Yeah, I look, the Jags and Trevor Lawrence have been really impressive ever since that London game. He talked about like learning and everything slowed down from him. His confidence has grown, and kudos to Doug Peterson and what he has done. And look, the Jags overpaid perhaps on some of the players, but they put weapons around Trevor Lawrence. For the Jets, we've talked about this on the show before, like a lot of what Salah has done, but the QB hokey cokey is absolutely crazy. Like Zach Wilson has been QB1, QB3, then was brought up to QB2. And they demoted Flacco. Then he gets in again as QB1, and then he goes straight back to QB3. I think the Jets need to, there's going to be a lot of soul searching, I imagine, at the end of this season. But how they came to pick Zach Wilson at 2, who made that decision, and how it has played out. Yeah, they're in the last chance saloon right now. So they needed Mike White back, but it is very difficult. Somebody will probably take a flyer on Zach Wilson because he's still on the rookie deal, but it could be a type of a Josh Rosen type situation where he ends up going, people will sign him because once upon a time he had the talent, but ultimately he ends up being second or third string at most, and kind of hanging around the league for a few years.
And I imagine even the Mike White comfort level that they have with him playing quarterback, I don't think that's the long term answer either. I think there'll be certainly a hard look of where they go in free agency come the end of the season in terms of securing their quarterback for next year. Difficult loss for the Jets. Like you're right, this Jets team had a feel of a playoff team a few weeks ago. The defense have been so strong, and they've had some really difficult losses. So they're still in with a chance. They play Seattle this weekend, and obviously then they play in Miami the final weekend of the season. If they win out, there is a strong chance that they could still make it. But it's just 2 really difficult games out of them. We won't touch on the Broncos. I think we caught up with that one earlier on, bearing in mind the news that Hackett was relieved of his duties yesterday. Bucks win it. We touched on it. The Bucks win a close one on Monday Night Football. Again, I genuinely thought the Bucks would dominate this game, bearing in mind McSorley was playing in this game. I thought the Bucks defense would play well. They didn't seem to get anything going. And O'Connor had another strong running game for the Cardinals. Cardinals up 16-6 late in the fourth quarter. It looked like this was one that they were going to cause a shock. They were going to get over the line, and then Brady has a strong drive, which was few and far between throughout the course of the night. It goes into overtime. They managed to sneak a win, still maintain the top of the NFC South. But again, like as you said earlier on in the show, the Panthers won't fear them. They beat them already this season. They won't fear them, bearing in mind how they're playing at the moment. They're just nothing is going right for this team.
And it like ever since Bruce Arians decided to step aside, it feels like kind of nothing has gotten right. Brady gets the win, but like this is not the Tom Brady of old. It's so evident that the decline has set in, and it is difficult to imagine that you get away with what he's getting away with if you're playing the Eagles or you're playing the 49ers in the playoffs. So to me, I suppose it will be interesting ultimately to see who comes out of this. The Cards, it's got to be clean house at this point. I mean, the talk that came out, obviously, I think just before Christmas was around the gulf or the chasm that has grown between Cliff Kingsbury and his QB1. It all seems so reminiscent of the Broncos situation in some ways. Similar contracts given to their QBs, similar sorts of chasms. QB seeming to maybe rub everybody up the wrong way. A lot of soul searching, I think, to be done in the desert in the off season.
Monday Night Football last night, Chargers secured their playoff spot. Comfortable win. I mean, the Colts defense played reasonably well. They had 4 sacks, they had quite a few hurries on Herbert. Herbert had a comfortable enough game. They kind of second half they kind of got into the running game a little more. First half it was a bit stop start. Eckler had a reasonably good game in the end, and Keenan Allen had a really strong game, over 100 yards. He seemed to be always available for Herbert. And for the Colts, Nick Foles came in. We know he's not the answer, but I was surprised he never got a start earlier in the season. Bear in mind the back and forth stuff between Matt Ryan. Then obviously he was relieved of his duties, and they brought in the second year quarterback, and Nick Foles was in the background. But we didn't see a lot from him last night either to fill any Colts fan with any confidence that they're going to finish the season strong. Chargers are in. Obviously I didn't pick them to go to playoffs. I thought what we saw from them earlier in the season, but they finished strong and it was a comfortable win.
Yeah, it was a really comfortable win. The Colts, another franchise that has so much soul searching to do. A couple of crazy stats from Stephen Holder. The Colts went 0-10 on third downs in that game, and it was the second time this season that they had failed to convert the third down. They were 0-14 at the Patriots in Week 9. Both of those were games where Matt Ryan didn't play. So the rest of the NFL has combined 2 games without a third down conversion. So the entirety of the rest of the league, all of the other games played thus far, has 2 of those games, and the Colts have 2 on their own. So they equal the rest of the league. That just tells you in terms of the QB play and what's going on there. And they have to figure out in terms of, there's questions around the GM there and whether he's going to remain on. There's been talk that, Jim Irsay would love to retain Jeff Saturday, but the way in which the season has gone means that he probably won't be able to. But that's the talk, is that he wants to, and obviously they've got to find a QB. By the sounds of things, Derek Carr may be available, so that might be one to keep an eye on. But realistically, the Colts should just go, and draft a QB and build. I mean, that's what they need to do. Stop with the sticky plaster and really just get on with a rebuild. For too long they've been trying to get by, and it just hasn't helped them.
Yeah, I think the Colts are sitting around 5th or 6th pick at the moment, so yeah, they will potentially have an opportunity to get a quarterback come April. Quick points on the Chargers' own. I didn't touch on it there. The Chargers' defense was very, very good last night, and then obviously just 7 sacks, 3 interceptions. So yeah, rightly called out. They have kind of come on over the past few weeks. We have been critical of how they were playing earlier on in the season, but the last few weeks they really shored up the defense, and obviously they'll want to keep that up now in the leading weeks, because they're going to be on the road come the playoff times, obviously, with the division locked up for the Chiefs. You touched on Derek Carr there. Is it like Sunday Night Football? Steelers 13-10 against the Raiders. Raiders up by 7 points going into the fourth quarter, and again they give up just 10 unanswered points in the fourth quarter by the Steelers. And even on the final drive, there's very manageable plays for Derek Carr, and Hunter Renfrow was wide open down the middle of the field. He completely misses him. Derek Carr now is setting records for all the wrong reasons. In the 9 years in which he's a quarterback in the NFL, he has the most losses for a quarterback. Archie Manning is number 1 in his career. Derek Carr is now number 2 in that listing. I like Derek Carr. I've always kind of been very high on him, but this season has been very worrying. And having spoke to Steve O'Rourke, a big Raiders fan, we had him on there recently. He thinks Derek Carr ultimately will be the fall guy for this season. He will lose his job and he will get traded away. And maybe it is the Colts, maybe it's the Jets, but someone will take a flyer on him. But there's been so many games for the Raiders this year that they just look back and say, how do we not win this game? The Colts game was one in particular. We saw what they did with the Chiefs in Arrowhead. They should have won that game. There's a few more. The Cardinals earlier in the season when they were up by 17 points. The Patriots game last week up by 17 points. Still found ways to try give that one away. And this game again was there for them. But find ways to lose games all the time. And for the Steelers, Mike Tomlin again just gets another one over the line. And they're still in, albeit it's a slim chance. They're still in with an opportunity of potentially making the playoffs as a 7th seed.
Look, this is for the Raiders. Yeah, we talked about. I think they will sacrifice Derek Carr. I think there are other bigger issues there, but I think they will lay the blame on him and essentially keep Josh McDaniels in situ. And Magic Mike still has the opportunity to remain above 500. Couple of tough games, of course, coming up, but we will keep an eye on that and see.
The final one, and it wasn't a great game. You picked the Falcons. Me and Mark went with the Ravens. The Ravens, it's very similar pattern in the play in their home games recently. Saw it against the Broncos, very low scoring, tight game. Saw it against the Panthers, in which they only pulled away late, and they won this game on the back of a defense with a number of fourth down stops on the Falcons. Big win for them, bearing in mind where they are in the division and obviously for the playoffs. But one that the Falcons will feel they should have won. Really, they had so many opportunities and missed opportunities, in particular in the red zone. They just, rather than taking field goals, they were going for it on fourth down and got stopped a number of times.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that Arthur Smith had said he wants to see them finish strong. I think for them, really, it's about figuring out what they have at QB. He's only a couple of games in, so they need to see a bit more and then decide what they do in the off season.
A couple of comments to wrap up. Good point by Owen, bearing in mind that the Chargers won last night, completely knocked the Raiders over. Karma on the back of last season's end of the season. Israel with the kiss of death. Yeah, battle with the GM next year. Crazy that Philip Rivers had to win the playoffs with an 11-5 record. Yeah, and that 11-5 record led to a wildcard game in Buffalo, and they nearly won that game too. Some great comments tonight again, as always. Appreciate everybody supporting the show, putting in their comments, bearing in mind it's Christmas week, so people taking time to tune in. Really appreciate it. Back tomorrow night, Colin, for a Week 17 preview.
Yes, indeed. Back tomorrow night. And don't forget, we have a host of content out there. There is that special episode about the Broncos, obviously firing the rookie head coach midway through the season. Only the kind of fifth, if you go back far enough, time that has happened in league history. And more content coming out later in the week to look at the Jags. So lots to look forward to, certainly. And yeah, massively appreciate the support and interaction. And we really are getting to the business end of the league now. So it'll be fun to preview the Week 17 games.
Can't wait to preview the Colts of the Giants, Colin. Big game. So we'll see. Give me a shout around 9:30 on Sunday night if the Giants have managed to win this game and make the playoffs for the first time in 6 years. Looking forward to that one. Looking forward to previewing all the games. Appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Colin, for now, I will talk to you tomorrow night.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of the festive period, everyone. And for anyone out there who is working in the hospitality or retail industries, I hope it is not too manic for you at the moment.